Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. It is Tuesday on The Rocks. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, September is recognized as Adoption and Foster Care Awareness Month, and the Children's Authority wants to raise awareness on these systems for persons who want to make a positive difference in a child's life. Now, raising a child that is not your own can be very rewarding, since it gives one the ability to positively impact a child's life and possibly change the course of that child's life forever. However, children who are no longer able to remain with their parents or immediate family can have challenges, and therefore foster care might be right for you. Today we are joined by Team Lead of Foster Care at the Children's Authority, Miss Anjuli Tewari, Fague, who will share information on parenting a child that is not your own and how you, the viewers, can become a foster parent. Mrs. Fague, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me this morning.
Of course. Now let's talk foster care in terms of how does the foster care system work locally?
Sure, no problem. So foster care has actually been around since 1995. It was a very small pilot project. A lot of people didn't know about it. In fact, if you speak to people today, many persons don't know that foster care exists in Trinidad and Tobago. But now it's formally sort of managed by the Children's Authority. We've been operational for about 7 years now, and we vet all of our foster parents. We place all the children in foster care. We monitor children in foster care. So it's a well-managed system. It's still small. It's growing steadily, and that's why we really utilize this month, Foster Care and Adoption Month, to sort of promote it, encourage persons to consider parenting a child that isn't their own, to explain the differences between foster care and adoption.
Thank you so much for that. Good morning again. Natasha here with you as well. So one of the biggest questions we have for you, as you mentioned, is, a lot of people aren't aware that foster care is something that takes place in Trinidad and Tobago. So what are some of the prerequisites, or what do you look for in order to qualify as a foster parent?
Sure. One of the most important things we look for is love. We really want those warm, safe, inviting homes for children. So if you think about it, we see it in the papers all the time. A lot of children have to be removed from their parents' home, their families' homes, due to traumatic circumstances, whether it's abuse, neglect, violence. And when we remove a child from a situation like that, you really want to place them in a safe and loving and warm and inviting home. So to me, that's the most important thing that we want to flag to persons interested in foster care, to have that genuine sort of love for children, because children will see it. They will know if you're in it for the wrong reasons. We also need to ensure that you have a safe home, because the worst thing we would want is for a child to be removed from a situation of violence and be placed into a situation of danger. And we also do vetting of all persons in the home. So we do this through interviews, psychological assessments, background checks. We really do have a thorough process. It's legislatively mandated. So we do our checks and balances. At the end of it all, we do also do some basic training for our foster parents in order to determine whether this person can be approved and added to our list, our register of approved foster care providers. So once you become approved, we can then match you with the type of child that you're interested in caring for.
Okay, wonderful. So you've mentioned what happens at the beginning of the process, but what about during the actual process itself? How does the Children's Authority lend that support or be there, I guess, side by side with the foster parent, if that's correct?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question, actually, because it's not like we just place a child with you and we ride out and we leave. We are there holding your hand throughout the process. When you become approved, you are assigned a caseworker who's really like holding your hand through that process. So once a child is placed with you, not only are we monitoring that child, but we're also supporting the foster parent. So we are giving advice, ongoing training, providing information on that child, because that child is still a ward of the state. So we do have to report regularly to the court. We also provide updates to the parents, because an important thing to remember in foster care, we're not ending that child's relationship with their family. It's very important for us at the Children's Authority for people to understand that we're not ripping families apart. In fact, what foster care provides is a chance for that family to heal. So when that child is placed, we are still maintaining the bonds with their birth family, but we're protecting our foster parents. We're never revealing their information, their contacts, their names. That child is in a secure location, So when that child sees their family, it is through the Children's Authority. It's separate and apart from the foster parents. So we are still fostering those relationships with their birth families, because ultimately the goal in foster care is for that child to be eventually, hopefully, reintegrated with their families where appropriate, possible, and in the best interest of the child. And that's where the differences come in with adoption, which we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, actually, we can jump in now, Mrs. Defarge, if you want to, because I know in terms
Sure.
of foster care, it seems to be temporary, but adoption may have a more permanent spin to it, right?
Yeah. And that's where
Yeah.
a lot of persons get mixed up. People always assume foster care equals adoption, and they are very different processes. The goal of foster care is to ultimately reintegrate or return that child to their birth family where possible, whereas adoption, like you said, is permanent. That child's their parental figures, that their rights are severed. So it is a permanent fixture. Now, I want to make sure the persons don't get put off by the temporary nature of foster care. A lot of persons come to us and say, well, I don't want to risk getting attached. I'm afraid that I'm going to get hurt. And I really want persons to reframe that whole sort of thinking of getting attached is a bad thing. I think getting attached to a child is a good thing. It means you have the heart and love to give. And when it's time to say goodbye to that child, we will support you through that process. I think it's a beautiful thing for us to be giving a child an opportunity to be returned to their family where possible. It's not a bad thing, and I don't want the nation to see foster care temporary is not something that should be aspired to. I think it's a beautiful thing to provide that temporary space for a child to heal, for a family to get their affairs together, get things in order, so that eventually they can have that child returned to their families if possible.
Is there ever a situation where you can start off with a foster care that leads to adoption, or are they two different processes altogether? Because I know that you're
So they
mentioning in terms
are.
of the love, and I think that parents may get so attached to this child that when it's time to return them to their families, there may be problems. So how will that work?
So they are separate processes. What we really want to sort of underline is we don't want persons to use foster care as a shortcut into adoption. They are separate processes. You can apply simultaneously to both. So you can do foster care and you can apply to adoption separately, but we don't want you to think that the child who is in your care in foster care can or will eventually lead to adoption. In some cases, it may lead to that, but that's case by case. Every case is different, and most children coming into foster care, we are giving the families a chance to make their lives better, get things in place. So the types of children coming into foster care and adoption are different. Children who go to adoption, their parents have given consent already. Those children, their parental rights are severed, so it's an easier sort of transition. But a child who's in foster care, we are still working things out. So we really don't want persons to get those two mixed up, and we don't want persons to use foster care as a shortcut. Now, you did mention attachment. People are going to get attached. I don't want to sugarcoat this. They're going to get attached, but I think we want to sort of look at, if we zoom out and look at the nation as a whole, foster care is something that all of us, all of our families have done informally over the years in some form or fashion, whether it's provide temporary care for a cousin, somebody from church, somebody from the village. It's something that we do, it's in our blood, it's in our culture. And you know something? We say goodbye and we move on, and it's okay. We say goodbye in different aspects of our life all the time, and we will support you through that. But I think ultimately we're looking at the big picture here. If a child can be returned to their family, that's something that I want to back. I want to be behind and support if possible.
Of course. Now, I know in the US they often offer a stipend. Is it the same thing in TNT for foster care?
Yes, we do. We do offer a stipend, but we want to make it very clear that the stipend is towards the needs of the child. So every child has a stipend attached to them. When a child is placed with you, that money goes toward the child. So when we approve you as a foster care provider, we don't want persons thinking, oh, this is my money. This is payment for my services. That money is specifically towards the needs of the child, and we will be monitoring you to ensure that the needs of the child are adequately met and that your own earnings, the money that you earn, is going towards your rent, your mortgage, your bills. So it's a big part of our approval process. We have to ensure that financially you are able to meet your own needs in order to ensure that you won't abuse the stipend.
And in terms of foster care as well, is it okay for a foster parent to adopt a child with their siblings as well? Like, is that what you would recommend rather than splitting up the children?
So when a child is placed in foster care, We do try as best as possible to keep siblings together, but unfortunately, sometimes, especially when we have very large sibling groups, for example, we have children coming in families of 5 or 10 sometimes, and that's really difficult for one person to manage so many children. So if it is that we do have to split children, we do ensure that continued visits happen between the children. So we are still maintaining those bonds and relationship. And ultimately, if we can move the children together, we will explore that. But sometimes we do not have that luxury.
Of course. And Mrs. Defarge, any final thoughts before we close?
Sure. Just want to encourage persons, that if you are considering parenting a child who isn't your own, opening your hearts and homes, you can contact the foster care unit on 627-0748, extension 40988. You can email us on fostercare@ttchildren.org or check out our website on www.ttchildren.org. Give us a call, have a chat with us, find out if foster care is for you.
Well, Mrs. Defarge, thank you so much for joining us and just sharing a little bit about foster care and, of course, how we can get more information about it from the Children's Authority. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was Team Lead Foster Care at the Children's Authority, Mrs. Anjuli Tewari Defarge, just sharing about foster care and actually sharing some thoughts on would foster care be right for you. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Stay with us.